My name is Kirk and I am 52 years old. I spent most of my life working construction building things that would last, believing in the strength of foundation and trust. 3 nights ago, I sat in my pickup truck outside an Olive Garden, my hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel, trying to process what I had just learned. The security guard's words kept echoing in my mind like a broken record. What kind of father raises a son who would try to poison him? The answer to that question would change everything I thought I knew about family love and the dangerous line between helping someone and enabling them to destroy you. Before I tell you how my own blood tried to destroy me, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe, because this story will make you question everything you think you know about family trust. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began. I have been living alone in my ranch house in Portland, Oregon for 3 years now, ever since my wife Janet passed from cancer. The house feels too big sometimes, but it holds 40 years of memories that I'm not ready to let go of. Janet and I raised our son Marcus in that house, watching him grow from a curious little boy who helped me fix things in the garage to a young man who seemed to drift further away with each passing year. Marcus is 25 now, and if I'm being honest, he has been struggling for the past few years. After dropping out of college, he bounced between jobs, never lasting more than a few months anywhere. The real problem started about 18 months ago when I discovered he had been gambling online, not just the occasional sports bet, but serious money on poker games and casino sites that drained his savings faster than water through a broken dam. As his father, I felt responsible. Maybe I'd been too easy on him growing up, or maybe I had not taught him the value of hard work the way my father taught me. So I helped him out. First, it was $300 for rent, then $500 for car repairs, then $1,000 to pay off what he said was his final debt. Each time Marcus would promise me things were different, that he was getting his life together, that this was the last time he would need help. The phone call came on a Tuesday evening. Marcus sounded different, more upbeat than he had been in months. He suggested we meet for dinner at the Olive Garden on Division Street, said he had something important to discuss with me. The hope in his voice made my heart swell with cautious optimism. Maybe this time was really different. Maybe my son was finally ready to turn his life around. When I arrived at the restaurant that Thursday evening, Marcus was already there, sitting in a corner booth wearing a button-down shirt I had not seen him wear in years. He stood up and gave me a hug that felt genuine, the kind we used to share when he was younger. The restaurant was busy with the usual dinner crowd, families enjoying their meals, couples on dates, the comfortable hum of conversation filling the air. We sat down, and Marcus immediately started talking about his plans. He mentioned looking into trade school, maybe following in my footsteps in construction. He talked about wanting to save money, about being tired of living paycheck to paycheck. For the first time in months, I felt like I was talking to the son I remembered, not the stranger he had become. Marcus insisted I order something healthy, suggesting I try their fresh squeezed orange juice instead of my usual iced tea. I normally do not like orange juice with dinner, but seeing how enthusiastic he was about making good choices, I agreed. It seemed like a small way to support his new positive attitude. The waitress brought over a tall glass of bright orange juice, and Marcus smiled as she set it down in front of me. About 20 minutes into our conversation, Marcus excused himself from the table, saying he spotted an old friend across the restaurant and wanted to say hello quickly. I watched him walk toward the front of the restaurant, though I could not see who he was talking to from where I sat. He was gone for maybe 5 minutes, returning with an apology and that same bright smile. While he was away, my phone buzzed with a text notification from my bank. It was an alert about unusual account activity, someone trying to access my online banking from a different device. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I had not told anyone my banking passwords, and I had been careful about my personal information since Janet died, and I started managing all our finances alone. When Marcus returned to the table, I mentioned the banking alert, casually watching his reaction. His smile flickered for just a moment before he suggested it was probably just the bank's security system being overly cautious. He seemed eager to change the subject, asking me about my retirement plans and whether I had updated my will recently. The question struck me as odd, but I answered honestly, telling him I'd been putting off those kinds of decisions since losing his mother. Marcus left the table again about 10 minutes later this time, saying he needed to use the restroom. While he was gone, I noticed one of the security guards, a middle-aged black man with kind eyes, watching our table with what seemed like concern. When Marcus returned, he seemed more anxious than before, checking his watch frequently and encouraging me to finish my drink. Our conversation took an interesting turn when Marcus started talking about money. He mentioned that he had some debts that needed to be paid soon, but assured me he had a plan to take care of everything. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. He looked at me with those eyes I had loved since he was born and said, "Dad, you probably will not need to worry about money much longer anyway." The way he said it, with a strange mixture of sadness and determination, sent warning bells ringing in my head. Throughout the meal, I noticed Marcus kept glancing at my orange juice glass, almost like he was keeping track of how much I had drunk. Every few minutes he would encourage me to drink more, saying things like, "That vitamin C is good for you," or "You should finish that before it gets warm." His attention to my beverage consumption felt unusual, but I attributed it to his new health-conscious attitude. The security guard I had noticed earlier seemed to be making more frequent rounds past our table than usual. I caught him looking in our direction several times, and once he even paused near the salad bar, which gave him a clear view of where we were sitting. At the time, I thought maybe he recognized me from my regular visits to the restaurant, but something about his expression seemed more serious than casual recognition. As we finished our main courses, Marcus suddenly announced that he had to leave. He said he had a meeting with someone about a potential job opportunity and he could not be late. He hugged me goodbye, told me he loved me, and left me sitting there with about half a glass of orange juice remaining. Something about his hurried departure felt wrong, but I could not put my finger on exactly what was bothering me. I was sitting there trying to process the strange evening and figure out why I felt so unsettled when the security guard approached my table. He was tall, probably in his 50s, with graying hair and the kind of steady presence that comes from years of dealing with difficult situations. He introduced himself as George and asked if he could speak with me privately for a moment. George's expression was serious as he sat down across from me in the booth Marcus had just vacated. He said, "Sir, I hate to bother you, but I saw something disturbing, and I think you need to know about it." His voice was quiet but urgent, and I could tell he had been wrestling with whether to approach me at all. What George told me next felt like being hit by a freight train. He explained that while I was not paying attention, he had watched my son pour something from a small vial into my orange juice. George said he had been working security for 8 years and had never seen anything like it. The liquid was clear, and Marcus had been very careful about when he did it, waiting for moments when I was distracted or looking away. George told me he had noticed Marcus acting nervously throughout the evening, making frequent trips away from the table and constantly checking to see if I was drinking the juice. He said Marcus had been carrying a small glass vial in his pocket, and during one of his trips to the restroom, George watched him transfer the contents into my drink when he thought no one was looking. The world seemed to stop spinning as I absorbed what George was telling me. This was not just about gambling debts or financial troubles. This was about my own son attempting to poison me. The banking alert, the questions about my will, the strange comment about not needing money much longer. Everything suddenly made horrible sense. George explained that he had wanted to intervene immediately, but was not sure how to handle such a serious situation without causing a scene or making accusations he could not prove. He said he had been watching me carefully all evening, hoping I would not drink much of the juice, and when Marcus left, he knew he had to tell me what he had witnessed. I asked George to describe exactly what he had seen, and his account was detailed and consistent. He had positioned himself where he could keep an eye on our table after noticing Marcus's suspicious behavior early in the evening. George said the vial was small, maybe the size of those little bottles you get medicine samples in, and Marcus had been extremely careful to make sure I was not looking when he emptied it into my drink. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My son, the child I had raised, loved, and supported through every struggle, had just tried to poison me. The orange juice I had been drinking throughout dinner, the drink Marcus had specifically encouraged me to order, was contaminated with something that could have seriously harmed or even killed me. I felt sick to my stomach, but not from any poison. The nausea came from the complete betrayal by the person I loved most in the world. George waited patiently while I processed what he had told me, probably seeing the shock and pain written all over my face. When I finally looked up at him, I thanked him for his courage in coming forward. I told him he might have just saved my life, and I meant every word of it. The drive home from the restaurant felt like an eternity. My mind was racing with questions, anger, and a deep sadness that seemed to fill every corner of my chest. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I sat in the truck for several minutes trying to decide what to do next. Should I call the police immediately? Should I confront Marcus? Should I get myself to a hospital to be checked for whatever he had given me? First, I needed to know what I was dealing with. I went straight to my computer and started researching what kinds of substances could be easily obtained and added to drinks without detection. The possibilities were terrifying. Everything from prescription sleep medications to more dangerous chemicals that could cause organ failure or worse. I realized that whatever Marcus had given me, the effects might not be immediate, and I could still be in danger. I decided to call my family doctor and explain the situation. Dr. Harrison has been our family physician for 15 years, and he knew both Marcus and me well. After describing what had happened, he strongly recommended I come to the emergency room for blood work and monitoring. He said depending on what substance had been used, there might still be time for medical intervention to prevent serious harm. The next few hours at the hospital were a blur of tests, questions, and worried waiting. The medical staff treated the situation with the seriousness it deserved, running comprehensive toxicology screens and keeping me under observation. Fortunately, the results showed only traces of a strong sedative, likely a prescription sleep aid, but in quantities that could have been dangerous, especially for someone my age with my heart condition that Marcus knew about. While I was at the hospital, I made the difficult decision to call my attorney, Sarah Patterson. I had worked with Sarah when Janet and I updated our wills a few years ago, and I trusted her judgment. I explained the situation and asked for her advice on how to proceed. Sarah was shocked by what I told her, but she immediately understood the legal implications and the potential danger I was still in. Sarah recommended documenting everything while the details were fresh in my memory and securing any evidence that might exist. She also suggested I consider getting a restraining order against Marcus at least temporarily while we figured out the best way to handle the situation. The thought of taking legal action against my own son was heartbreaking, but Sarah helped me understand that this was not just a family dispute. This was attempted assault, possibly even attempted murder. When I finally got home from the hospital in the early hours of the morning, I did something I never thought I would do. I changed all the locks on my house. Marcus had a key, and given what had just happened, I could not risk him having access to my home. As I worked with the locksmith, I kept thinking about all the times Marcus had come over in recent months, all the opportunities he had to go through my personal papers, to learn my passwords, to plan whatever he had been planning. The hardest part was accepting that this had not been a spontaneous decision on Marcus's part. The planning involved, from suggesting the restaurant meeting to encouraging me to order orange juice to carrying the vial with him, meant he had been thinking about this for days, maybe weeks. My son had been planning to poison me, and I had been completely unaware of the danger. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I was living in someone else's nightmare. But I knew I could not just hide in my house and hope the problem would go away. Marcus was still out there, still in debt, still desperate, and still dangerous. I needed to find out how deep this betrayal went and what else he might be planning. I started by checking my home security system. I had installed cameras around the house 6 months earlier after some break-ins in the neighborhood, but I had never really reviewed the footage. What I found when I started looking through the recordings made my blood run cold. There were multiple instances over the past few months where Marcus had come to the house when I was not home, using his key to let himself in. The camera footage showed Marcus going through my desk photographing documents and spending time in areas of the house where he had no reason to be. In one particularly disturbing video from 2 weeks earlier, I watched him copy information from my financial statements and take pictures of my insurance policies. He had been systematically gathering information about my assets, my health, and my personal affairs. I called my bank and credit card companies to report potential fraud and to secure my accounts. What they told me confirmed my worst fears. There had been several attempts to access my accounts online over the past month, all unsuccessful because of security measures, but showing a pattern of someone trying to gain control of my finances. The timing of these attempts corresponded perfectly with Marcus's visits to my house. My insurance company informed me that someone had called asking about my life insurance policy, claiming to be me and asking about beneficiary information and payout procedures. When they asked for verification information, the caller hung up. The call had been made from Marcus's phone number. I spent the afternoon gathering all of this evidence and organizing it for Sarah. The picture that emerged was of a calculated, systematic plan to not just harm me, but to profit from my death. Marcus had not just been planning to poison me in a moment of desperation, he had been setting up to inherit my assets and collect on my insurance policies. The emotional weight of these discoveries was almost unbearable. This was not the son I had raised, the boy who used to help me work on cars in the garage, who brought me drawings from school, who cried when he accidentally stepped on a bug. This was someone I did not recognize, someone who saw me not as his father, but as an obstacle to getting money. But along with the heartbreak came something else, a cold, clear determination. Marcus had made his choice, and now I had to make mine. I could not let him continue down this path, both for my own safety and for his own good. Sometimes love means setting boundaries, even when it breaks your heart to do it. I decided to set a trap. I would invite Marcus over to discuss updating my will, something he had been asking about. I would give him the opportunity to reveal his true intentions, and I would be ready for him this time. I called Marcus the next evening, keeping my voice steady and normal. I told him that our dinner had gotten me thinking about the future, and I wanted to discuss updating my will and insurance beneficiaries. I could hear the excitement in his voice as he quickly agreed to come over that Saturday afternoon. The next few days were spent preparing for what I knew might be the most important conversation of my life. I contacted George from the restaurant, and he agreed to give me his phone number and be available if I needed a witness to what he had seen. I also arranged for Sarah to be nearby during Marcus's visit, just in case things went badly. I set up a recording device in my living room, hidden where Marcus would not notice it. I needed to have proof of whatever he might say or do. I also made sure my neighbors knew I was having a visitor, subtly ensuring that people would notice if something unusual happened at my house. Saturday afternoon arrived gray and drizzly, typical Oregon weather that matched my mood perfectly. Marcus showed up exactly on time, carrying a folder that he said contained information about his own financial situation. He seemed more energetic than he had been in months, almost eager, and it made my stomach turn to realize why he was so excited about this meeting. We sat in my living room, the same room where I had taught him to play chess, where we had watched countless baseball games together, where Janet had read him bedtime stories when he was small. Now it felt like a courtroom where I was about to prosecute my own son. Marcus started the conversation by saying how much our dinner had meant to him, how it had made him realize how important family was, and how he wanted to make sure he was taking care of me properly. The irony of his words, given what he had tried to do to me just a few days earlier, was almost too much to bear. I decided to be direct. I looked at my son, this young man I had loved unconditionally for 25 years, and said, "Marcus, something interesting happened after you left the restaurant the other night." His expression changed slightly. A flicker of something that might have been fear or guilt, but he maintained his composure. When I told him that the security guard had seen him put something in my drink, Marcus's reaction was immediate and telling. He didn't ask what the guard thought he saw or express confusion about what I was talking about. Instead, he immediately went into defensive mode, claiming the guard was mistaken, that he would never do anything to hurt me, that someone must have misunderstood what they saw. But his body language told a different story. Marcus was sweating despite the cool temperature in the house. His hands were shaking slightly, and he kept looking toward the door as if calculating whether he could leave quickly if necessary. These were not the reactions of an innocent person being falsely accused. I pressed him about the banking alerts, the insurance inquiries, and the evidence I had found of him going through my personal papers. With each piece of evidence I presented, Marcus became more agitated and defensive. Finally, when I told him I knew about the vial and exactly what he had put in my drink, his facade cracked completely. The confession, when it came, was not the tearful apology I might have hoped for. Instead, Marcus became angry, blaming me for not giving him enough money to solve his problems, blaming the loan sharks who were threatening him, blaming everyone except himself for the situation he was in. He told me he was desperate, that people were going to hurt him if he did not pay his debts, and that I was going to die eventually anyway. So why not now, when it could actually help someone? Hearing my son talk about my death as a business transaction, as a solution to his financial problems, was the final nail in the coffin of our relationship. This was not a moment of weakness or desperation. This was a fundamental lack of humanity, a complete absence of the love and respect that should exist between a parent and child. The days following Marcus's confession were a whirlwind of legal procedures and difficult decisions. I provided all my evidence to the police, including the recording of our conversation, the security footage from my house, and George's eyewitness testimony from the restaurant. The case against Marcus was strong, and he was arrested within 48 hours. Marcus tried calling me from jail, alternating between angry accusations and tearful apologies. He claimed he never would have actually gone through with hurting me, that he was just trying to scare me into giving him money. But the evidence told a different story. The substance he had put in my drink was a prescription sedative in a dose that could have been fatal for someone with my heart condition. The legal process was emotionally exhausting. I had to testify about my son's actions, describe in detail how he had betrayed my trust and endangered my life. The hardest part was seeing him in court, looking smaller somehow in his orange jumpsuit, still the face I had loved since he was a baby, but now attached to someone I no longer recognized. Marcus eventually accepted a plea deal, admitting to attempted assault and fraud. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison with the possibility of parole in 18 months if he completed addiction and financial counseling programs. The judge was clear that this was a serious crime regardless of the family relationship involved, and that Marcus needed to face real consequences for his actions. While Marcus was serving his sentence, I made the difficult decision to sell my house in Portland. There were too many memories there, both good and bad, and I needed a fresh start somewhere that did not remind me daily of what had happened. I found a small but comfortable home in Tucson, Arizona, where the warm, dry climate was easier on my aging joints, and the distance from Oregon gave me the space I needed to heal. George, the security guard who had saved my life, became an unexpected friend. We stayed in touch regularly, and he even came to visit me in Arizona once. He told me he had been thinking about that night for months, wondering if he had done the right thing by getting involved. I assured him that his courage had literally saved my life, and that he should never doubt the importance of speaking up when he saw something wrong. In Arizona, I started volunteering with a local organization that helps older adults protect themselves from financial fraud and family exploitation. I learned that my experience, while devastating, was not unique. Many elderly people face manipulation and abuse from their own family members, people who see their aging parents or relatives as sources of easy money rather than human beings deserving of love and respect. My work with other victims of family financial abuse helped me process my own experience and find meaning in what had happened to me. I could not change what Marcus had done, but I could use my story to help other people recognize the warning signs and protect themselves from similar situations. 3 years have passed since that night at the Olive Garden, and I'm living a life I never could have imagined. The pain of Marcus's betrayal will always be with me, but it no longer defines my daily existence. I have learned that healing from this kind of trauma takes time, patience with yourself, and the willingness to build new relationships based on trust and mutual respect. Marcus was released from prison 8 months ago. He sent me a letter, a long, handwritten apology that seemed genuine and thoughtful. He explained that he had spent his time in prison getting sober, working with counselors, and trying to understand how he had become someone capable of such terrible actions. He asked for my forgiveness, not expecting anything in return, but wanting me to know that he understood the magnitude of what he had done. I read his letter several times, and I felt something I had not expected: relief. Not because I was ready to reconcile with him, but because I could see that he was finally taking responsibility for his choices. For 3 years, part of me had wondered if I had failed him as a father, if there was something I could have done differently. His letter helped me understand that his actions were his own choices, not the result of my parenting failures. I chose not to respond to Marcus's letter, at least not yet. Forgiveness is a process, and I'm not ready to have him back in my life. Maybe someday I will be, but right now my priority is protecting the peace and stability I have worked so hard to build. I have learned that loving someone does not mean you have to accept being hurt by them, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is maintain boundaries that keep you both safe. My life in Arizona has brought unexpected joys. I met Linda at a community gardening club 18 months ago. She is 58, a widow who lost her husband to a heart attack 5 years ago, and she understands the complex grief of losing someone you love, whether through death or betrayal. Our relationship has developed slowly, built on friendship, shared interests, and most importantly, complete honesty about our pasts and our needs. Linda knows my whole story about Marcus, just as I know about the struggles she faced with her late husband's gambling addiction. We both understand the importance of trust, communication, and maintaining our individual independence even as we grow closer. Neither of us is looking to recreate what we had before, but rather to build something new that honors what we have learned from our experiences. I still miss the son I thought I had, the relationship I believed we shared, but I have stopped mourning the loss of someone who may never have existed in the first place. The Marcus who could poison his own father was always there, hidden beneath the surface of the person I wanted him to be. Accepting that reality has been painful but also liberating. George visits Arizona every winter, now escaping the Oregon rain for a few weeks of desert sunshine. We have become genuine friends, bonded by that terrible night, but sustained by mutual respect and shared interests in fishing and old movies. He often tells me that he thinks about that night too, how close I came to drinking enough of that contaminated juice to end up in the hospital, or worse. Through my volunteer work, I've met dozens of people who have faced similar betrayals from family members. The stories are heartbreakingly similar: adult children who steal from elderly parents, grandchildren who manipulate their grandparents, family members who see vulnerability as opportunity rather than a call for protection. But I've also seen the strength and resilience of people who refuse to let these betrayals destroy them. The most important lesson I have learned is that survival is not just about avoiding physical harm. It is about protecting your ability to trust, love, and find joy again after betrayal. It would have been easy to become bitter, to shut myself off from all relationships, to spend my remaining years angry and isolated. Instead, I chose to believe that not everyone is like Marcus, that genuine love and loyalty still exist, and that I deserve to experience them. Sometimes people ask me if I regret helping Marcus so much over the years, if I wish I had been tougher with him earlier. The honest answer is complicated. I regret enabling behavior that ultimately led him to become someone capable of such cruelty. But I do not regret loving my son, even if that love was not returned in the way I deserved. What I have learned is that there is a difference between supporting someone and allowing them to abuse your support. There is a difference between unconditional love and unconditional tolerance of harmful behavior. I can love Marcus and still refuse to be his victim. I can hope for his rehabilitation while protecting myself from further harm. The question people ask me most often is whether I think Marcus will ever truly change, whether the person who wrote that apologetic letter is real or just another manipulation. The truth is, I do not know, and more importantly, I've accepted that it is not my responsibility to find out. Marcus's journey toward becoming a better person, if that is what he chooses, is his own work to do. My job is to live my own life fully and safely. Looking back on that night at Olive Garden, I'm grateful for George's courage in speaking up. Grateful for the medical care that kept me safe, and grateful for the strength I found to protect myself and seek justice. But I am most grateful for the understanding that surviving betrayal by someone you love does not make you a victim for life. It makes you a survivor with hard-won wisdom about the difference between genuine love and manipulation. As I sit here in my Arizona home watching the sunset paint the desert mountains in shades of gold and purple, I feel something I never thought I would feel again after that terrible night: peace. Not the peace of forgetting what happened, but the peace of having faced it, survived it, and chosen to build something better from the ruins of what I lost. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love us the most are the ones capable of hurting us the deepest. But surviving their betrayal does not make us victims. It makes us wiser. It teaches us that real love protects rather than exploits, supports rather than manipulates, and respects boundaries rather than violating them. Most importantly, it shows us that we have the strength to choose who deserves access to our hearts and the courage to protect ourselves when that trust is broken. Have you ever experienced betrayal from someone you trusted completely? How did you find the strength to rebuild after having your faith in someone shattered? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because these conversations help all of us understand that we are not alone in facing these difficult challenges. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences about overcoming family trauma and finding healing. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that survival and recovery are possible even after the deepest betrayals. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that protecting yourself is not selfish, it is necessary. May you find the courage to trust again, but also the wisdom to trust carefully.